My career has been very interesting, especially as a student. So these are all of the paid jobs that I have done. Um, and one thing I wanted to say, there is one job that's not here that was paid, but that was when I just came to Canada. And so, as an immigrant, one of the things you get told is that, you have to start small. You have to start with the entry level jobs. You have to do anything that's available to you. And so, yeah, I saw all of my friends that came together, like they were like somewhere working at Savon, Safeway, different positions. But I'm like, well, this is not really for me. And so I'm like, okay, let me just try. So that it doesn't look like I'm lazy and everyone was working and I was not working. And so my first job, I took a waiter job and I did just one shift. After the shift, I was like, I can't do this. I slept throughout the next day because I had to stand for like 8 hours. And so I really started to reflect, like, okay, why am I actually doing this job? What do I want to get from it? And then I started thinking, like, they always say, like, employers will tell you that you don't have Canadian experience. There's this, they don't recognize your education. So what should I be doing now to actually help me get to the job market when I'm ready to graduate? Because again, I need references because I need my professors to write references for me. Like if I'm working at a restaurant, I don't expect like, my manager or whoever is like write references for me in the corporate world. And so that was kind of a turning point for me. Like I'm going to step back and like, actually evaluate what career path I should be taking that would help make it easier for me when I graduate. And so my first ever job that I was like, okay, this is it, was a student fundraiser. And I was actually very strategic about that position because one of the things I struggled with when I came here was accents. In the classroom, it was too fast, like, professors speaking too fast. And I'm like, okay, what can I do in a way where like I am building my competency for like learning how to talk to different people. And so UBC engagement office, basically the job was you have to just go there, you speak to alumni, tell them like ask them how they're doing, update their contact information, and build rapport with them. And for me, that was instrumental because I got to talk with a lot of alumni from the Faculty of Medicine. And then I use that as an opportunity to always ask them what worked for you, what did not work for you, like what advice would you give to someone who's, just starting? Like what did you wish you had done? So it's like it was a job, but I was getting information from that job because alumni they were always happy to share and like, you don't do this, don't do that. So that's I started telling people like if you're in a graduate program and you haven't connected to any alumni from that program, that's a huge error because again you want to learn from what worked for them, how they transitioned into the job market, and you're also building your network. And so that's how I started. And then I went on to be a teaching assistant in the Department of Biology, and I taught 100 level biology for about a year plus. And then I moved on to be a practicum student and all of that. So basically, all of the positions on the right now that I think about it was when I was when I was in UBC, and those positions were mostly me going out there to actually ask for them. So one of the things I would usually do after like a session, I would email the professor and say like, this class was wonderful. These are all of the things that I learned. Are there actually TA opportunities for me to actually TA this class in the next session? And then professors see that you're engaged even during their sessions and they're like, yeah, sure. Actually, even at some point, I was rejecting TA opportunities because I was too swamped up. So that's why I tell students, especially immigrants, like if you don't put yourself out there and, make them notice you and actually shoot your shot at, professors, no one is going to actually give you the chance. You have to take that extra step. And another thing that I also noticed was, my peers were very important for me because one thing I notice again when immigrants come, it's easy to just fall into like I'm talking to only the immigrant group in the class, or I'm talking to only the people that look like me in the class, and that's very wrong because I know it's hard to assimilate. But when you're in a new place, the people there are the ones who have the information. So normally practicums, they'll be advertising practicums and, some of them are unpaid. But then I got to start talking to my classmates and I knew that people were getting $10,000 practicums. I'm like, how are you doing it? And then they actually told me like, oh, these professors, they have this grant, so you just have to reach out to them. And that's how I ended up having a paid practicum because again, I wouldn't have actually known that, people were going out of their way not to wait for like what is advertised on the school website to actually like, shoot their shot at professors like, oh, I want to work for you. And then you're getting like paid $10,000 when other people are like working basically for 3 months for free. So those are some of the things I want to like take you through my journey. It's like, because there are some of these little things I think are not important, but they may be pivotal in your journey. So one of the key things I want you guys to take away from this is, sadly, in Canada, getting a degree does not guarantee easy access to opportunities. Employers want someone who has done the job before and can do it again. And so many times people would want like, oh, I would grow into the position, but that doesn't really happen. Because again, when you're with an hiring manager, what they want to know is, well, have you done this before? How can you replicate this again? So it gets you thinking that, when you're doing a degree, you should actually start thinking about the kind of jobs you want to do. Because one of the common questions I usually get from people is that, Marianne, what courses should I do to get a job in Canada? And I'm like, you're asking the wrong question. You should be saying, with what you're doing currently, which jobs can I actually get? And I ask you, what job titles are you interested in? And people go blank. So if you're a student, that is something you should start thinking of. Like, I am doing this degree. What job titles am I targeting? Because again, it's then time to start building your competency. And one of the waking points for me was, I think I was in my first year just finishing up. And then there was a position in the Dean of Medicine. They were hiring for a position. And when I saw the job description, I was like, I'm currently studying in this faculty. I'm doing a master's, but I know I would not get this job. So that was kind of like, I knew there was a gap between, yes, you're doing a master's degree, you're doing a graduate degree, but the skills that are needed may not be everything that you're learning in your current master's degree. So you have to actually take that step to know what is in the job market and what people are looking for, so that you can start upskilling. And then when you're ready, you're into the job market without like, you can explain to a hiring manager, this is what I've gained. And another thing is, again, it's all about, you have to know your end goal to strategize how to get there. I love writing things down. Like every position that you saw in the previous slide, I've actually written them down previously, like done my market research on each of the job description, and like, okay, this is where I'm getting to, and this is how I'm going to like, package my CV. This is how I'm going to like upskill and get experiences. In your relationship currency, here we call it, there's a lot of networking that happens. So networking with your peers, networking with alumni, networking with just people that that are in positions that that you like. And LinkedIn is very powerful. It's one of the things I used a lot. And the thing is, when you're a UBC student, you have access. Because it's like when you message someone and you're like, oh, I'm a UBC student, or I'm this student, I see that you're working this place. Can I please get some insight on the position? Like, do some sort of an informational interview. So that's one thing that I found really valuable. Is like, people are always ready to help when you're a student. So this is a good time to start actually utilizing that to actually network and get into spaces and get information from people who are the place where you want to be. Another thing is self-awareness. Again, everything is always changing, like with immigration, even with careers and industry. So it's always good to know like what's happening around you. And then the sixth one is, of course, there are going to be lots of rejections. If that is inevitable, no matter how like, good you are, rejections would come. But one thing I've gone to see rejections are, they're like the opportunities for feedback. So normally if I apply for a job or anything, and probably I go to an interview stage and I don't get the job, I actually would message back to the hiring manager or whoever and say, thank you. I would like to learn where can I improve? And I've actually gotten 2 job offers from that. Because another thing is, although you may not know the role, they like people who are teachable. I've had 2 friends this year who actually got positions mainly from asking for feedback. They did not get a job initially, but when another position opened up, they were the first ones to get a call without the job even being posted. So those kind of things is like, the feedback helps you to like know where you're supposed to improve, but also it's like you're expanding your network. The key skill I want to teach us today is what we call skill mapping. So when you're thinking about your career, like even if you're still in high school or whatever, start thinking about, what skills do I have? What strengths do I have? Because at the end of the day, that is the value that you can communicate with people. Because if someone meets you today, how many of us are confident? Like if someone just approaches you like, "Hi, what do you do?" Can you in 30 seconds tell the person like what your expertise is? So when we're entering into 2025, you don't know who you will be meeting or where. So you should be able to have like even a 30-second pitch, like this is who I am, this is where my skill set is. Yeah, so that's one of the things in terms of like being able to communicate to people and pitch yourself at any opportunity that you get. So it starts with, thinking about 3 or 4 possible job titles that you want to have. So sometimes people are so fixated on like, this is the only job I want to do. But in Canada, you need to have plan A, B, C, D, and sometimes E. So you need to expand that scope to like, well, these are the 4 different types of jobs. They may be related, they may not be related, but then you could then identify what transferable skills that you can have for each job and transfer to the rest. So again, when you're writing down your career or your vision, think about 3 or 4 job titles that you know that it's something that's been on your mind that you want to do. And if you know, maybe after the recession and you want to get more advice, ChatGPT, I'm sure people are familiar with ChatGPT. So you can actually use this prompt. I can just ask ChatGPT, your HR professional with talent is this, here is my resume. Copy and paste your resume. And then ask ChatGPT to provide a summary of 6 jobs or careers where you would be a good fit. And then possibly provide reasons why they have matched you with that career path. Another thing is you could also paste your resume and then you could like provide a summary of areas where I've showed this. So it will give you like what's a starting point if you don't already have a starting point for like what job titles you should be looking at in Canada. So what you're going to do is, I love LinkedIn so much because I feel like it's a one-stop shop for everything. So for example, if I say I'm interested in being a project manager, I'm just going to go on LinkedIn and do project manager jobs. And you'll see the advertisement for different project manager jobs. And then what I'm going to do is actually look at the job descriptions. And I'm not going to do that for just one job description. I'm going to go through probably like 10 or 12 job descriptions. And then I'm going to see like what is actually reoccurring that, that all these job descriptions are always asking for. So that starts, bringing your self-awareness like, well, if I want to be a project manager and out of the 7 or 6, 10 job descriptions, they've mentioned things around, I need to know risk management, stakeholder management. I need to know how to use Asana or project management tools. It starts to give you the idea of like the things you need to upskill in, because when you submit your resume, the hiring manager is expecting to see that. Another thing is, again, if you have interest in a company, say for example, I'm interested in Microsoft or Deloitte, I would actually go to their company website and then look at their job description for the job titles I'm interested in. Because again, if you want to get into that company, you should be looking at what they actually require. Another thing you could also do is, if you go on LinkedIn normally also and you go to those jobs, you could also like see people who actually have the titles of those jobs. And then you could message them simply saying, introduce yourself, of course, that you would like an informational interview, 15 to 20 minutes, either on Zoom. You want to get to know more about, what they do in their job, the skills that they use. Then again, you're also creating a relationship, because it's like, if that person has that an opening sometime, they would remember that I had an informational interview with this person. And they may probably like let you know. So what you're looking at, you start looking at what is the education of interest, what are certification requirements. I would never advise anyone to just go and do a certification because people are saying that you need this certification. And that's very common. I see people always saying, go and do this course, you get a job. That is not true. You have to know actually what the job requires before you say you're wasting money or spending so much money to get a qualification. So if you're going through a job description and you're saying, oh, okay, PMP is required or is nice to have in 7 out of the 10 jobs, you're like, okay, probably a PMP would be beneficial. But again, one thing I've noticed, I currently do not have a PMP, but I've worked as a project manager for 4 years. That's because apart from just showing that I have a PMP certification, in all of my resume, in my interviews, I've been able to show that I've been able to manage projects, because one, I've been able to use project management language. I've been able to show like, the methodologies and all of that stuff. And the only reason why I was able to do that was because I have studied the market. I have seen what people want, and I'm able to reiterate that. So there's some form of psychology. It's like you tell people what they want to hear and you show them what they want to see. Another thing is you look at the work, of course, the work experience requirements. And then you look at the functional areas, technical skills and tools So this is very important, especially in Canada where like there's a heavy focus on technology. So for each job, you have to look at, okay, what software should I actually like know? So when I was doing my master's, it was very heavy on Arrow and SAS. But then I was finding out in job descriptions, they were asking for other things. So I had to go out of my way to actually learn those additional skills and software because they were not teaching me my master's program. And if employers want that, it means I need to get to know it somehow. So that's another thing. You get to know like what technical tools you should be learning how to use in your free time so that when you're graduating, you're not going to start struggling. Or like when you're ready for that job, you're going to start struggling. And then salary ranges. We know money is important. So the jobs that you're thinking of, like when you look at, your goals for like employment, is the salary range actually worth it? So it also brings you to that evaluation of like, well, probably this is not what my investment. So again, that salary helps you to also like triage. And then the number of jobs. This is very important. So when I graduated from my master's degree, one of the first job options for public health scientists is you'll be an epidemiologist. But then when I went on LinkedIn, epidemiologist jobs across Canada was 119 something. So so exactly like so while the market is small, the competition is tight. So should I actually spend my time in applying for such a tight job? And then I looked at another career option I looked at was data analyst. And I looked at data analyst, of course, we'll be doing lots of data analysis. And there were 19,000 and something jobs. There were more opportunities. And then the other thing I was interested in was project manager, management roles. And there were also like 1,000 more opportunities than epidemiologists. So this process kind of helps you to actually triage that, and you know that you're choosing something that you can actually get opportunities in. This is kind of like what it may look like, and this is I just did a screenshot of like one of the skill maps I've had. So it's like when you're going through the jobs, I like to copy and paste. Like I like writing. So I would usually be coloring like, things that are coming up. So like this is just I think for project manager, then I had up to like 15 job descriptions that I just posted to like, like, okay, they're asking for, how to multitask, communication skills, business development, project management, all of the things. So it's more like you're color coding or like color coding the skill sets that you need to know, that you need to sell yourself in. So then I like to have must have, because we see some job descriptions, they're like, the person must have this. So I like to separate must have. Then they have, usually we say it's nice to have this. So I have my nice to have section. So this is a process that actually helps you to know like, okay, this is what is happening. If anyone wants to take a picture, you can take a picture. This is what is happening in the job market, and this is the skills that employers are asking for. And one of the interesting things about this thing is that, sometimes you should not just think that you want to stick to one industry. So when I look at project manager jobs, for example, I'll look at in tech, I'll look at in health, I'll look at probably in like social development or something. And then it kind of gives you that vast idea, like across industries, this is what people are asking for. Because again, these skills are transferable. And that's one thing I think immigrants sometimes miss when they come to Canada. It's like, you want to forget all of your, experiences that you've had before coming here. But if you know for sure that, all of these things you've done them before, it's just you communicating that you already have these transferable skills. So yeah, again, this is just an example of what I did for data analyst. Then I was seeing like, lots of data modeling. They were asking for database software management that you need to be aware of. And then I got the salary range is like between 44 to 80K a year. And the number of jobs available in Canada, BC. Okay, Canada isn't sure. I think Canada was more. Then in BC, this was the number of jobs that were available. So that kind of gave me an idea of like for each job title I was looking at, which one would be the higher, should I say the higher hat to reach? So for example, if I said I wanted to be a data analyst, although I knew how to use ARA and SAS, all of these softwares that were very common across job description, I didn't really have them. Like I needed to learn them. So this wasn't like a low-hanging career path for me. So a low-hanging career path is like, if you decide to apply for the job tomorrow, how like you can do like 70% of the job without having to learn from scratch. So this exercise also helps to like, okay, if I decide to go for any job that I don't need to learn much for, which job is that? But then if I know that, data analyst is what I want to do full time, this is what I'm passionate about, it's like, it's the desired career path, but then I need to have like a plan on how I can upskill to meet this. Because then that's why most people complain that, you're submitting resumes and you're not getting responses, where it's like, it's more or less the quality of the application versus the quantity. Because I can tell you, like, it takes like 30 seconds for a hiring manager to look at your resume, and they're looking at like the first half. And if you haven't caused their interest in that first half, your resume is going to the corner. So that first 30 page, that first page, if you're not catching my attention and it's not like what in my job description or the skills, I'm not saying it. I'm just going to pass and look for someone. And then the way Canada is right now, the unemployment rate is high. Competition is high for jobs. Like you have own people who have like PhDs applying for entry level with multiple years of experience. So again, that's why we have to be very strategic with how we're placing ourselves. This is just kind of like an overview. So like when you've gone through all of your job descriptions, I would recommend you have like a kind of like a master template of like, okay, must have skills for project manager. You need a bachelor's degree in STEM minimum. Minimum, they also need like at least 2 years of experience managing projects. I want us to take our attention closely to keywords. I don't know, people hear keywords a lot. And normally keywords, it's where like, I don't know, are people familiar with ATS system for resume? So normally some hiring companies or companies do not they use computer software. And this computer system basically screens your resume before it gets to a human. So there are some keywords that, a project manager they would expect should be in that resume. And if if your resume doesn't have that, it automatically gets passed. So your resume is not even having the opportunity to get to a human because you may be missing certain keywords in your resume. So when you've gone through like these job descriptions, please compile a list of keywords that keep on recurring. So for project manager, some of the keywords that always recur in job descriptions is problem solving, risk management, stakeholder management, process continuous improvement, whatever negotiation, and some of those tools. So yeah, these are the keywords that are always there. You have to showcase those keywords in your resume, and you have to do it smartly. Another thing is, apart from even putting those keywords in your resume, another thing you need to do is to actually know what those competencies incur. For example, if they say they want someone who is a project manager, it means that probably they're expecting someone who has knowledge of agile methodologies, waterfall methodologies, who knows continuous improvement, who knows change management. So your job doesn't end at knowing what keywords they are, but you actually have to go on Google or whatever site you use to actually see like, okay, what does it mean to actually know change management? What does it mean to actually know continuous improvement? What does it mean to know to have problem solving skills? What does it mean to know prioritization? Again, and it's knowing the methodologies within each of those competencies that you can drop in your resume and also when you're interviewing. So after you've done this exercise, you should be able to know, okay, what is my low-hanging career path that you can start immediately? What is that best fit career path that you're excited about, but you need more planning and you need to do more upskilling to actually start applying? And then you have to come up with a skill development plan. So that skill development plan actually comes in very handy to actually know, like, how would I get these skills? And one of the things I always tell people is, if you're working in a job and something that you think about in 2025, you have to start telling yourself, what am I actually getting from this job? I always say it's either you're earning or you're learning. You cannot be losing in both ends. If not, that's not the right job for you. You should be changing jobs like ASAP. And so another thing is volunteering. But the thing is, volunteering has to be strategic. You shouldn't just volunteer. And this also goes to those in high school. You shouldn't just volunteer because, okay, I just want to do it. But you should have a concrete plan of the things you expect to get from that volunteering experience. You should be very strategic that you are learning actual tangible skills from the organizations you are volunteering with. Even if it's if you want to volunteer for an event, volunteer to be a coordinator. Volunteer because again, that's project management because an event is a project. Volunteer to, engage with stakeholders. Volunteer to be the communication, something like hold tangible positions are not something that, you cannot actually put in your resume at the end of the day. And it also helps that, when you actually deliver, those organizations that you volunteer for can become your references. Because one thing in Canada, they always check references. Your references are always important. So for any job that you're doing, you should always be thinking, okay, what skills am I getting from this job that would help me for the future career, in my future career plan. So if you're not getting anything, then it's time to reevaluate if that is actually the right job for you. Because even if you decide to start small, do not start too small. One thing I've also noticed in Canada and in job descriptions, they would always say, what is your most recent related experience? So the longer you get stuck in a job that is not actually doing anything for you, the harder it is to actually get into the job market. And I see it a lot, like with immigrants where, like, you've been working in 10 years somewhere else, you have professional experience, but then you come to Canada and then you probably just doing one side job and you've been there for 2-3 years. When you get in front of a hiring manager, it's actually quite hard to convince them that the thing that you did 3 years ago, you still know it. So that's something that should get us thinking that, start small but not start too small. And whatever you're doing, that's the skills you're getting should be feeding into that future career path that you're already targeting. We talked about keywords. This is one of my old resumes. If you remember, we talked about, having that broad master sheet where you can, have a summary of everything you've seen for each position. And, one of the things that you would always see is minimum years of experience. So if you're writing your resume, one of the things you should always write is the number of years of experience that you have. Because, for example, if I'm applying for a project manager position, and then the minimum years of experience is 2 years, but I just start my resume with public health specialist with this, the hiring manager will lose interest because they probably do not want to go through your entire resume to figure out how many years of experience that you have. So that is something that you should always be explicit about in your resume. And then your LinkedIn, they always check. In most cases, they would always check your LinkedIn. So it's always important that your LinkedIn is optimized just the way your resume is. Because I've had hiring managers say, well, although your resume was good, they checked your LinkedIn and the LinkedIn wasn't really collaborating with what they were seeing in the resume. So that's something to keep in mind. Your years of experience, and then the key areas where you have expertise in. And that's why I asked the question when I started, like, if you meet someone today, would you be able to communicate what expertise that you have and in what areas? So again, you have to be explicit about that. This is how many years of experience, and this is, all of the expertise I have. And again, these expertise are also keywords that you've also seen in job descriptions that are recurring. And then I like to have this competency section because it's kind of like expatiates on like all of those keywords, some of the keywords. I'm not saying you should add everything if you know you don't have it, but if you know you have certain, things that you've already seen, this is a good place to capture it, where you have your core competencies and it's like you can list all of the tools. So for example, under data, I have like data cleaning, data visualization, analysis, descriptive statistics, data management, communication. So those keywords that you've extracted from your skill map, this is where you place them and make sure you populate it as much as possible with the things that you have. Because again, you want to be beating that ATS system of when, a computer is screening your resume. And again, you want to capture the attention of your hiring manager. And I put this particular screenshot because this is the key section where you're capturing their attention. If you are not capturing their attention in that first 30 seconds, your resume is going to decide. Again, your education, of course, you put it there and then you start with your professional experience. And one thing I like to do in terms of professional experience, so if I say a job description, and the first thing in the job description is they need someone with experience managing projects, they need someone with experience managing contracts, they need someone with experience with budget management. It means that the first three bullet points in my resume would be manage multiple projects costing blah 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 $1 million across. You know why? Because sometimes the hiring manager is not the person you are working for. It's just an HR person that may not necessarily know what the job is. So if they're reading a resume and you just have like lofty language that does not, because normally they will have the job description open and then they're looking at your resume, but it's like if it's not really aligning, they will just, put it to the side. This person is not what we need. So it's very important that you are using their language. Again, it's psychological. Show them what they want to see, because it's like employers are looking for who has done the job and who can do it again, not the person who would grow into the role. My second my second bullet point will probably be something about manage contracts worth something, something, something $1 million, whatever. And this is what I achieved. Again, it's very important to not just give job descriptions in terms of responsibilities, but you should be mentioning tangible achievements you had in those specific roles. And even though you don't have an achievement, it's okay for you to actually use to. So for example, if they had something around communication to different stakeholders, I would say something like, I've published like, manuscripts or academic papers using various and communicating with different stakeholders using various mechanics. You can also use the tools that you've used in a job to demonstrate the competencies that you've had. So that's something to take note, and that's why it's important, again, to do that skill map, because again, you want to echo what people want to see. It's kind of like the benefits. We've talked about like optimizing your resume, because then you're using those keywords, you're using their language to like showcase that you actually have the skills. And then LinkedIn is the same thing for your LinkedIn profile. LinkedIn has a session where they talk about what your brief bio. And one thing that I actually got to know is that those keywords that I showed you, sometimes that's what recruiters actually type in. So if you're putting those keywords and scattering them along your LinkedIn profile, LinkedIn would end up showing more recruiters your profile. Because again, the keywords that they are searching for, they are being directed, like these are the people that have it. So again, that's why it's important for you to do that skill map and ensure that you are up to date with what is in the market trends, what people are actually looking for. And then another thing is professional development. So it doesn't really end with getting a job. It means it also ends with you planning for the future. One of the ways that I'm doing it now, it's like I am doing things outside the scope of my work. And that's one thing that people would always say, do the job you are paid for. As an immigrant, I would never advise that. If you know you want to stay in the job forever, fine. But if you know you have plans to move, whether your boss is not treating you well or whatever, you personally know that you have a plan. And the reason why you're achieving so much is because you're planning your next move. Because again, I am bulking up all of the experiences I'm planning to tell my next hiring manager or my next hiring panel. So there's that succession planning where you're actively upskilling and planning for your next position. Prioritizing and setting smart goals. Again, it's more like if you want to achieve something in the next 6 months, this is what it should look like. So for example, if you say you want to change a job in the next 6 months, it means that you should already have a plan of like all of the things you have to get done before that mark. And then interviewing, again, one thing that I think I've noticed is people do not know how to tell their stories accurately, or they don't know how to tell their stories, but they get, I don't know if it's anxiety. So one thing I would always say is, when you're interviewing, use the STAR approach. I don't know if are people familiar with STAR, like what is the situation, what is the task, what actions you did, and what results you got. And with the STAR approach, it's not we did as a team, we did as a team. It's what did you do? And what achievements did you get doing that? So that's one key thing to keep in mind. And again, when you're interviewing, it also helps like to go through what process you took. This interviewing, it helps you when you know your strengths, what value you bring. It's kind of easier to like, okay, well, I manage stakeholders using this plan, or I manage my budget using Asana. You name drop tools that you've been using, and like it's kind of like they're like, oh, this person actually knows how to do the job. create situational awareness, on the job training, and performance appraisals. This is very important because, again, when you're in jobs in the corporate, they always do performance review. So you have to keep track of, like, the things you're learning and the things you've learned, so that, when your supervisor asks you about your time, you're able to actually communicate that, this is what I've done, these are the initiatives I've led, these are the tools I've used or I've introduced to the team. Because another thing is, for example, if your team is having difficulty in doing something and you've done your market research and you know that, oh, this is a tool that we can actually use to solve this problem, you bring it and people appreciate you because then you're being innovative. So again, it's another thing to keep track. And then another thing is, the important thing is negotiation. I know immigrants, I find that we don't know how to negotiate. We're always like very humble with salary expectations and like, well, it's okay. But when you know how much strength and value you have, and you know that your skills are up to par with what's necessary in the market, you're actually able to negotiate and, for more compensation. Because then you can say, thank you, whatever, but I'm aware that, these are needed and I have those, so I should be receiving at this. And again, if you don't even know the salary range, sometimes people lowball you. So if you see in the previous slide, I showed like some salary ranges, and that's old, by the way, so they're not supposed to use that presently. Sometimes you get lowballed and then you accept and you think that they've paid you enough. But if you've done your market research and you know how much that position actually goes for, it means that you can actually stand up for yourself and actually get the salary that you deserve based on the skills, based on the experience that you give. Because one of the things I always like to say, well, I'm coming with this level of experience. This is what I'm bringing to the role. I'm not coming to learn in the role. This is the skills I'm bringing to help you and your team. Job Scanner is a really good AI tool. So what Job Scanner does is, if you have a job description, you can paste the job description and then you paste your resume, and then Job Scanner compares the two and it tells you how many percent match it is to the job description. So if your resume is showing that it's a 40% match, be sure that it's not going to get to a recruiter. The ATS system will not allow it to pass. So Job Scanner will tell you where you need to optimize your resume, what keywords you need to include, how you need to rephrase certain things, so that your resume beats the ATS tracking system and your resume actually gets to the front of a recruiter for those companies that use those recruiting systems. So it's actually a pretty good tool. I think they allow like for free something a month. But if you're actively looking for jobs, I would say this subscription is worth it, because then you're able, like for each application, you're able to actually tailor based on the job description and based on your resume. And then these are just some interview tools I just listed that are AI, because again, it's always good that you practice interviewing. And if I have an interview tomorrow, I really don't need to prep too much. And do you know why? Because I have a master sheet of interview questions and answers. So probably before the interview, I will just refresh my mind. And that's when people would say it's too much work. It's too much work, but it saves you a lot in the long run. So if you know you're applying for certain jobs and you've been in interviews and you know these are the kind of questions they always ask me, why not document it? And you're like, okay, when next I have a next interview, I already have answers that I can pull from. Because again, this STAR approach is really highly recommended, because again, people want to know like how you've dealt with situations, what were the actual tangible results, and not you just, saying things freely. So it's something I always recommend. Always document your interview questions and answer. Document achievements that you make when you're in the job. If your manager or someone commends you today, document that. If someone says that you did so well in a meeting or your project did so well, like document that, because those are some of the things that you want to be highlighting in your next interview. And if you wait, you may forget. So that's one of the key things I like about documentation, is it's really good to keep track of stuff. Relationships, I cannot emphasize this enough. Again, I'm not saying you should not be friends with people, but always be very careful about the kind of people that you relate with, because sometimes it creates an echo chamber of doubt. Sometimes if you if you have someone who tells you like, oh, I applied for this position, the person is like, ah, you will not even get it even before you apply. Like, it happens. And sometimes people are telling me, like, Miriam, you like big things too much. I'm like, yes. So you have to be mindful of the kind of people you have around you and that kind of echo chamber. Because if it's too much negativity and like too much, you cannot do that, you cannot do that. You may think it's not affecting you, but at some point it's just, why am I even trying? People like success, but sometimes people already have that doubt that it will not work. So try and limit that as much as possible. Not don't quarrel with anybody, but be conscious of, the people you associate with and how much they motivate you or demotivate you. And mentors. I am very big on mentorship because I believe if I want to get somewhere, I should communicate with people already at that level and how they got there. So currently, and sometimes mentors won't change. So you find your mentors in people who are doing well, professors, whatever. And sometimes you even actually just explicitly ask, can you please mentor me? Like, this is what I'm trying to achieve. And at every stage in my career, I've had people who have mentored me all through. Because then sometimes you get stuck and you're like, you need someone who to actually echo with and like, okay, probably this is what you should be doing. So mentorship is a big thing. So I would definitely advise that as you're joining your vision board, if there's one thing about relationships that you should include, is mentorships. Identify people who you look up to or who are in places where you desire to be, especially here in Canada, and try and connect with them. Informational interviews, I already talked about it because again, if you have companies you're interested in, reach out to people. The first time I started applying for government jobs, I was still in doing my master's. And I remember connecting with different alumni on LinkedIn from UBC, public health, who were working in government jobs. So they were able to tell me, like, this is what you need to do. So again, network with alumni, network with people who are in different jobs or in companies that you're interested in, introduce yourself and let them know what you're looking for. I already talked about peers and professors, and then friends. Again, don't restrict yourself based on ethnicity. You shouldn't only be friends with a certain race or this thing because the people who have been here, they know the system, they know how it works, and sometimes even till now, if opportunities open up, some of my friends like, Marian, we saw this and this is not a good fit for you, even though I'm not looking for anything. So it's good that you have those relationships because again, they would teach you how to actually assimilate better and actually get those opportunities. And if you're working in the corporate world, and I find it a lot, all those small office parties that you don't like to go to, please go. You don't have to go to everything, but it's like you're building relationships because again, sometimes when in private, people who get promotions are the people, not necessarily people who work more, people who are liked. So the small get-togethers that that you may be thinking it's not a good thing for me, try and go to some of those. And even when you're as a student, I know like then when I was in my program, we're always hosting classmates like activities. Some people would not go at all, but again, it's like you're investing in those relationships. Like I'm your classmate and you've never spoken to me or like you've never been come to any of my parties or anything. So how do you expect me to just one day start sharing that there's an opportunity for you? So if you don't invest in those relationships, no one is actually going to you have to feed into it to actually get something back. Just circling back to that example I made of my practicum, people were doing free practicum and other people were getting $10,000 in practicum. And I wouldn't have known of that information if I didn't have friends who I was actually close to. If you're a student, if you want to shoot your shot at professors and introduce yourself to get whatever it is, teaching assistantship, research assistantships, or practicum opportunities or whatever, it's basically introducing yourself, what your interest is, attaching a good CV, a brief bio of what you've done before and the skill set that you bring. When I was a student, I used this a lot and I always got opportunities. So yeah, this is one of the examples of when I had my practical. And then this is just I created screenshots of informational interviews. If you want to informally reach out to someone on LinkedIn or whatever, I provided an example of when I was still a student, when I was reaching out to other alumni, and also just other people that I randomly meet and I like to connect to them to actually get information. In all of this, I know it's a lot of information. I want to say, emphasize that it's important to take care of yourself in this process. Applying for jobs can be a full-time job. And it could actually drain you a lot, especially if lots of rejections are coming in. So in your vision board, I think create that space for self-care so that you're not just, firing all through. I give an example, like at some point, it was too much. I was even rejecting TA positions because I knew I had reached my limit. Because again, I was RA, I was TA, I was this. So again, remember to take care of yourself because again, if your body breaks down, it's hard. Know your limits and remember to like take that time actually to take care of yourself, no matter what that means to you. I just launched a platform, and it's called We Succeed, and I'm calling it the Diary of My Immigrant Reflections. And basically, for me, I want to just document, the things that have helped me, practical tips, resources, my journey the past 5 years being in Canada, what has helped me. And also, I have lots of people in my network who are also doing well. So also bringing those people to talk about, what helped them to succeed, people who have stood out in the things that you're doing. So this is the socials. You can follow us. We Succeed.